All right, good morning, everybody. I am Brenton Brown. I am the Director of Public Policy and Community Affairs for the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's small business webinar, specifically focusing on the Paycheck Protection Program. Just to let you know a little bit about the Commission for Minority Affairs, we were created as a state agency in 1993. And our goal is to be a catalyst for a socioeconomic change within the state's ethnic minority communities. As such, we continue to work daily, tirelessly, to ensure that all the residents of South Carolina are treated equitably and achieve economic prosperity. In accordance with that mission, which is to uplift our communities, we've identified several areas of importance in connecting minority communities to economic resources during this COVID-19 pandemic. We definitely hope that everyone is staying safe and that your families are staying safe. Please stay home and only go out the home when needed. It is our belief that with the right knowledge and guidance, our state's minority communities can prosper even during this difficult economic time. On today, to assist us and really to instruct us, I should say, we have two experienced business professionals. First, we have Mr. Jim Johnson. He is the Region Director at the South Carolina Small Business Development Centers, which is located at South Carolina State University in Orangeburg, South Carolina. He is an entrepreneur that has owned and operated a medical supply company. He was a restaurateur, and he currently owns a property management company. He is a graduate of the College of Charleston, Claflin University, and the South Carolina Economic Development Institute. And he is also an adjunct professor, instructor in business at Claflin and South Carolina State Universities. And we also have joining us Mr. Gary Robinson. He is a business consultant and has enjoyed success as an entrepreneur, business consultant, and life coach. He started his first business in 1991, and he endeavors to share his wealth of knowledge and experience with others. He is a graduate of Hampton University with a degree in entrepreneurship and enjoys educating others about the benefits of small business ownership and community development. These men will answer questions about the Paycheck Protection Program and how it is a resource for small business owners. Thus, without further delay, I present to you Mr. Jim Johnson and Mr. Gary Robinson.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Glad to be here. These are definitely trying times. This is Jim Johnson, and I'm the director with the Small Business Development Center in Orangeburg at South Carolina State University. And there are a couple programs we wanted to go over today. Very important programs for folks who are seeking some relief during these crazy times we have here. And I have with me Gary Robinson, who is a business consultant in our office. And Gary and I are going to split the two programs, the two main programs, which is the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program. Both of these programs are important. Some are better than others. Depends on the individual of which one you apply for, and we'll try to clarify that. And just to give you a brief synopsis of other things that are going on, I think most people know about the economic impact payments that should be coming this month sometime, which are coming to every family who's filed a tax return, and it will be coming through the IRS. And so that's meant to help folks. And if you just come over here, you can, if you want to find out more information about any of this stuff, generally you can go to the IRS website under economic impact payments. Also under IRS, there are the employee retention tax credits, which is another tool designed to help people who are employing folks, and they can file tax credits. I will say I won't go too in depth into the tax credits, but I can say if you get funding from the federal government, a loan to cover your payroll through the PPP program, you can't double dip and also get the tax credit. But feel free to go to the IRS website and check that out. And that's just another tool. There's a lot of stuff coming down the pipe, and is just a lot of information. That's why we're here, try to help clarify some of the stuff. And we'll start with the EIDL, which really was the first product that was unveiled by the Department of Treasury through the Small Business Administration. And this product, Gary Robinson's going to talk about it. And basically, it's pretty easy. And everybody, this is the one thing, if you can do anything, definitely do it. But I'm going to hand it over to you, Gary, and let you pick up on the EIDL or EIDL, as they say.
All righty. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to cover, I'll start with this screen to share. And let's see here. All right. Do you guys see the SBA? All right. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to share my screen.
I can see it, Gary.
You see the SBA? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there are many ways to get to this page, but the easiest way, if you go online, do sba.gov/disaster, and it will take you to this page. When you get here, you click apply for assistance. Now, we have had some people who from this page can get lost. The easiest way to get to the actual application is to click here. And this will take you to the application. Now, to explain this particular loan, as Jim said, there were different legislations that created these programs, and this one was the first one. And so if you applied a couple of weeks ago and you did one where you had to download a document and had to upload it, if you did that process, you have to start over. So just so you know, if you did that, you need to go back online and you need to go back here and redo the online process. Anything that was done before this screen, and they had changed it like 2 or 3 times. Anything that was done before this one, those things don't exist anymore. So if you haven't done this particular form, then you need to go back and you need to do it over. So to explain what this loan covers, this loan is basically for working capital loans, as well as taking care of some payroll. Now, this is the loan that has the $10,000 grant that's attached to it. So the first $10,000 that you get from this is a forgivable grant that is a part of this. Now, they don't ask you about how much money you need when you go through this process. Basically, you'll answer the questions on each one of these 5 screens, and it's a very easy process. They don't ask a lot about different financial information. The only 2 financial questions they ask is, what's your gross sales for the past 12 months? And it's basically from January 31st of this, from February of last year to January 31st. So you need the your gross sales for that period of time. Okay, so you would put in your gross sales, and then the only other number they ask for is your cost of goods sold. Now, some business owners know what that is, and others are not necessarily clear about it. But basically, cost of goods is anything that went into you providing your products or services to your customers. So rent is a operational expense that's not cost of goods. But let's say you make a book. The production cost for making each single book is a part of cost of goods sold. So for that same period of time, you will need to know what your cost of goods sold was for that period of time. So that's what you need. The only 2 numbers that they ask in this particular application. When you get towards the end, they ask you, do you want to be considered for the $10,000 grant? So you have to say yes to that. Okay. And in addition to that, it is not getting the grant. It is up to $10,000. It is not necessarily $10,000. So you may get less than that. So it's not a guarantee that you get $10,000 for this particular application. But once they get back in touch with you after this, if you need money for other things, other working capital, the SBA will work with you on additional monies that you need. And you can ask for money up to 6 months of working capital through this particular program. But again, that's after they get in touch with you after this initial application that they do with you. Now, do not expect that they're going to give you a call. If they are going to get in touch with you, they will get in touch with you via email. If you don't get in touch with them in about a week, there is a 1-800 number that you can use to call them to check the status of your loan application. So that is how they will communicate with you. So in all of this, you want to make sure that you are being very careful about scams and people wanting to offer you different things as it relates to this. If you have any questions about someone calling you, be sure to contact either the SBA district office, or you can call the SBDC, or you can call Minority Affairs. I'm sure between one of these 3 offices, we will definitely let you know whether or not the communication that you're getting is legitimate or not. But as it relates to this particular loan, you can ask for monies for working capital. So that's something to know. Now, there are other programs that are out there. There's 2 more, but Jim, do you want to cover the PPP, or you want me to cover that one as well?
Let's see, I'm prepared to cover the PPP.
Okay, all right. But one last thing on the EIDL, just so you know, because I know some people had questions about nonprofits. This particular loan, the EIDL, the one that I'm showing you right now, this one does cover nonprofits, and it covers church entities. So if you are a church, you do not have to have a 501c3 letter. All churches are assumed to be charitable organizations. So you don't have to go out and try to get a tax exempt letter. But now if you are a 501c3, then part of what they will ask you for down the line is they will ask you for your 501c3 tax exempt letter, but not for churches. And churches can apply for this loan. And before I hand it back over to Jim on the PPP, you can apply for more than one of the, you can apply for this as well as the PPP, but the monies cannot be used for the same things. So it is very important that you use the money for exactly what you said you're going to use it for. And each bucket has different requirements. So you do need to understand that if you get money under the EIDL program, there are requirements, as well as if you get it under the PPP. And one last thing, Jim, if you want to give back to me, the one that came out last night from the Department of Labor, I do have information about that one. So I want to share that one as well.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. We did have a question about whether this information is available in multiple languages. I don't know if you've seen that on the SBA website or not, Gary.
I have not seen. I have not seen it in a different language. No.
The SBA is generally, and the federal government is generally good about offering any content in multiple languages, but you may have to call the customer service line to get someone on the phone that speaks that particular language.
I do see it offered for Spanish. So
yeah, generally English and Spanish.
In the top right-hand corner, there's the SBA in Espanol.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the EIDL, as Gary mentioned, is it's a really versatile product that we are recommending that everyone start with. And pretty much, as Gary said, most folks are eligible for this product. So it's pretty easy application. This is actually screenshots of the whole application here. It does exclude, you have to, you know, certify yourself in several different areas. Farmers are not eligible for the EIDL. So if we have any farmers out there, they're not eligible. They are eligible for the PPP, which we'll talk about. And the USDA actually has funding, but they have not decided how they were going to use that funding yet. So they're still making some decisions. And as Gary mentioned, this is what you'll see if you go to apply. You'll be prepared to have your EIN or your social security number. You need to know what type of organization you are. This is where Gary mentioned that you'll have to have 12 months of revenue. And also you'll have to enter your cost of goods sold. Cost of goods, many businesses will not have cost of goods sold. Cost of goods, there's no cost of goods associated with services for the most part. Cost of goods, for instance, if you have a restaurant, your cost of goods are the food, the packaging, the cups, the paper products that go into providing the meal. So depending on what your business is, you may or may not have those cost of goods sold. If you do have rental properties, there's a section here for rental properties if you're a landlord. Also, nonprofits have sections here as well, faith-based. And you come down here, and pretty much after you get this information, it's just starting to ask for some of your primary business info.
One quick thing, Jim, if you go back up to that section on the nonprofits, as you can see, these particular boxes are not required because they don't have the red mark, but people need to know these questions are really for faith-based. When you get to the question where it says combined annual operating expense, that's faith-based. The next one after that is faith-based. And the next two are also tied to the faith-based questions. So these do not have to do with for-profit businesses.
Thanks, Gary. As you get down here, you're just, what's your business activity? They'll probably have your category. It's a drop-down menu. You can just choose from it. And then detailed business activity is a subset of your business activity. How long have you owned the business? If you started the business after February 15th, you're not eligible. And I've come across a couple of those already. So it has to be before all this disaster started. Who's the owner information, percent ownership. You're gonna have to have your birth date, social security number again here. You can add additional owners if you have multiple owners in the organization, and you're gonna have your home address and some more certifications. If anybody helped you complete this form, put their information there. And come on down, you're gonna have to have your banking information handy. And this is an important box. You have to click this box if you want to be considered for the advance of up to $10,000, which is the grant. And a lot of folks, they want the grant, they don't want the loan. But a lot of people have asked us, how long will this take? And right now they're saying once you apply, you should hear something within 3 days to a week. We have not heard too many responses of approvals yet. So we're still, waiting to hear. But you put your banking information in here, and supposedly what happens is once it's approved, you'll get an email from the SBA saying you've been approved for an advance, and they'll give you an amount. And they may say you've been approved for a loan up to a certain point, and they'll give you an amount. You can reject the loan offer and accept the advance grant, or you can accept both. At that point, they'll advise you as how you proceed, but they would have your account information, and it would be deposited directly there. And that's the end of the loan, or that's the end of the application. So essentially it's 3-4 pages, 5 pages. It shouldn't take too long to fill that out. going back now, we just spoke about the EIDL loan advance and loan. Also, those loan terms for the EIDL EIDL loan are up to 30 years at 2.75%. The rate is a little bit lower, I think, for nonprofits. So it's a very good deal, you know, if you decide to get it, and you would use it for mainly for working capital. Okay, and in the case we do have questions, will they be sending money directly, or do we have to approach our local banks? Depends on the product. And we're about to get into the payroll protection program. The EIDL will be sent to you directly by the federal government, SBA. So we're going to go into the Paycheck Protection Program now. This is the newest program they just released last Friday. So it is super new. It's called the Paycheck Protection Program. This is a forgivable loan for businesses. And it basically, the idea is to keep people employed. So there's three main areas that you can, that they're designing this around, which is your payroll, your rent or mortgage interest, and your utilities. Basically to keep the door open. You can, this loan is a little different. And I'm going to go through what they sent out. Let's see here. This is what is sent out from the Treasury Department. So the PPP, what is it? It's $349 billion in forgivable loans to small businesses that have been impacted by the COVID crisis. All loan terms will be the same for everyone, and they could be forgivable, but you have to follow some rules, and I'll go through those. The loan amounts will be forgiven as long as the loan proceeds are used to cover payroll costs, mortgage interest or rent, and utility costs over the 8-week period after the loan is made. So once you get that loan, you have to use the money that you were given for these categories, and only these categories. If you do not use them for those categories, then that loan, a portion of that loan can be converted in, or a portion of that forgiveness could be converted into a loan. Employee compensation levels are maintained. That's the other component. So not only do you have to spend it on these categories, you can't lay employees off. It's meant to retain your employees. So if you have 10 employees and you lay one employee off, then your forgiveness, they'll have a formula, and your forgiveness will be reduced by, you know, the percentage of people you lay off. You also cannot reduce pay of employees. If you reduce pay, then forgiveness is reduced based on how much you reduce the pay. So they have formulas to try to figure this out, and essentially just play by the rules, and you can be 100% forgiven. And this is meant to try to get you through this time and keep everybody employed. Also, some other things, payroll costs are capped at $100,000 on an annualized basis for each employee. So if you have an employee that makes over $100,000, you would have to cap that. You could not apply for more than $100,000 for that particular person. Anything over that would be excluded. Due to likely high subscription, it is anticipated that not more than 25% of the forgiving amount may be for non-payroll costs. So again, this is heavy. This program is heavy on payroll. They want to be able to use it for payroll and paying people. So that's saying that only 25% of the amount that you get can be used for rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. So if you borrowed $10,000, then you would spend $7,500. You could spend $7,500 on payroll and $2,500 on rent, utilities, mortgage interest. If you went over $2,500 on rent, mortgage interest, and utilities, then essentially a portion of that would not be forgivable and would become a loan. Now, what if it becomes a loan? They still have pretty good terms. It's 1% interest for 2 years. So, and any loan payments that would have to be made are deferred for 6 months. So if you did spend more money than you had allocated in that percentage, or you didn't follow the rules on paying the payroll and it became a loan, then you wouldn't have to pay it for 6 months, and then it'd be a 2-year term and 1% interest rate. Like I said, when can you apply? This started last Friday. Now, the difference between this loan and the EIDL loan goes through the SBA. This loan has to go through a local bank who's an approved SBA lender. So you have to go to your bank to apply for this loan. And not only that, this bank has to be an approved SBA lender. Banks have a path to become SBA lenders, and many banks have applied for this product to become, so that they can process applications for their customers and some other folks. But at this point, on Friday, the only people who were doing it were some of the big banks. Many of us small regional banks are still trying to figure this out. They're just taking calls, and they're taking their customers' information and saying, okay, we'll get back to you. They're waiting on further clarification from the SBA. And I also wanted to stress that all this is fluid and changing because it happens so fast. Many times when federal legislation is passed, agencies like the SBA have a year or more to implement these programs. They passed this on Thursday or Friday early, or they actually had clarification Friday early morning. And of course, y'all know they passed it at the end of March, the legislation. So within almost a week, they're coming out with this product. And the rules just came out the day, April 3rd, after midnight. It came out. So you can imagine that the banks are just like trying to figure out how to implement this program. And the banks are really, not only do they not know all the rules, and they are using their money, the bank's money, to lend, and then they will be reimbursed by the federal government through the SBA. So they want to have all their I's dotted, T's crossed to make sure that they're going to get the money from the federal government. So they're a little conservative on that side. And plus, some banks are what you would call small cap banks. They don't have a lot of money. And once that money starts being lent out, then it could affect other things within that bank. So you could imagine how this is going to be interesting, how it unrolls, and the story is still being told. And so when you call your bank, we're recommending that you call your bank first, that you bank with, where you have a relationship, and tell them that you want to apply for the PPP. And, if they're on the list, then they should give you some type of response. And there is a list, I think, that was sent out to everybody. If not, you can actually go to the SBA and look that list up. We have, for instance, this is an example of the SBA lenders in South Carolina. This list is actually on the SBA website. It's a pretty thorough list. Most of the major banks are on there. A few not, some you've never heard of. The main thing is some of your small banks are not on there, and ag-related banks. And I did mention that farmers are not eligible for the EIDL, but farmers are eligible for this PPP loan. And Ag South, which is a farm credit, they've applied to be SBA lenders. If you are a sole proprietor, independent contractor, self-employed type of business where you really don't have employees, you can apply for this. You don't have to have employees. You do pay yourself. So, but you can't start applying for this until April the 10th if you're independent contractor, self-employed. But you can receive loans to cover your payroll and certain expenses through SBA lenders. So where do you apply? I just mentioned this with your SBA lenders. And that list, I think, was sent out. If not, we can definitely send it out. Farm credit system, institutions, and whatnot. Go to the SBA and you can get the list of lenders like I just showed you. Again, who can apply, who's eligible? Nonprofits, all businesses, veteran organizations, tribal businesses, sole proprietorship, self-employed, businesses in certain industries can have more than 500 employees. There's actually, if you go to the SBA website and you go to this particular component of the site, which talks about coronavirus relief options, generally you can come and find out if you're eligible. So if you have more than 500 employees, they have like a little site that you can go to, which tells you if you're eligible or not. So definitely check that out, and if that applies to you. A lot of people can apply for this, but like I said, it's mostly just for payroll. What do I need to apply? Well, you will need to complete the payroll protection loan application, and you will also have to talk to the bank, because the bank is funding this and underwriting it, and they will have to, obviously you will have to complete this form, the payroll protection program loan application that is provided by the SBA. It's a federal form, which will have certifications on it, and you have to submit the application with required documentation to an approved lender that is available to process your application. The deadline for getting these applications in, by the way, is June 30th. So you can submit applications starting April 3rd for some businesses, April 10th for everybody, all the way to June 30th. And this application, if you want to take a look at it, is right here. This is the Paycheck Protection Program application. So they're asking you what type of business you are up here. You're going to have to put some of your business information in. Again, your EIN number, your basic information. One of the things you're going to have to do is go ahead and calculate what your payroll was, your average payroll for the last 12 months. And you're going to put that in there. And then basically you multiply your payroll times 2.5, which is essentially that what they're looking at is that would be equivalent to about 10 weeks of business, or 2.5 months. And then you come up with the amount, number of jobs, which is the employees that you have. And then below you would select payroll and rent or other things that you would want to include. It doesn't give a monetary amount for the payroll or the rent, but you'll be filling out additional forms from the bank, which will, include an amount. So ownership information, you'll have to answer these questions, which are certification questions. There's a whole list of them through here. More certification questions. Basically, according to this, you can't be debarred, suspended, ineligible for federal loans, that type things. Also it has a line here, have you received an EIDL loan between January 31st and April the 3rd? If you have, there's an addendum, because if any of that money is used for payroll or the same type of expenses that you're asking for in PPP, then you can't double dip. You can't ask for money through the EIDL for payroll and for money through the Paycheck Protection Program through payroll. But the EIDL is for working capital, and you can use that to pay other bills that you need to pay. But it can be payroll. It just would be deducted from this particular program. So it can be pretty complex, and you will have a personal banker working with you, I'd imagine, unless you're, it'll be digital. It'll be digital. Bank of America has a digital process, and some bigger companies do, and eventually, I think most of them will be digitalized, and the application will be submitted through a portal with the bank. So, and every bank's going to be a little different. So, if you're in a small bank like a regional bank like South State Bank in South Carolina, or you're going to Bank of America or Wells Fargo, those will be different experiences, and they will be processing things much differently. So it's just going to be different for everybody. Here to ask what can I use the loan for? Again, payroll, interest on your mortgage, rent under lease agreements, and utilities. These also, what are your payroll costs? Salary, wages, commissions, tips, employee benefits, costs for vacation, parental, family, medical, and sick leave, whatnot. State and local taxes assessed on compensation. And for a sole proprietor and independent contractor, wages, commissions, income, net earnings from the self-employment, capped at $100,000 on an annual basis for each employee. So if you're a sole proprietor or independent contractor, whatever you paid yourself for the year, up to $100,000. How large can my loan be? Loans can be up for 2 months of your average monthly payroll costs from last year, plus an additional 25% of that loan. The amount is subject to $10 million cap. If you are seasonal or a new business, you will use different applicable time periods for your calculation. Payroll costs will be capped at $100,000 annualized for each employee. How much of my loan will be forgiven? As I mentioned before, it could be up to 100%, but you have to follow the rules. 75% will be for the payroll related. 25% will be non-payroll costs. And of course, if you decide that you need to reduce your staff, your loan forgiveness will be reduced if you decrease your full-time employee headcount. It also will be reduced if you decrease their salaries and wages more than 25% for an employee that made less than $100,000. And rehiring, you have until June 30 to restore your full-time employment and salary levels for any changes made between the 15th of February and the 26th of April. So all that's to say, just try to there are considerations for the forgiveness, and you need to keep that in mind, because otherwise it won't be forgiven and it will become a loan. Here it says the interest rate is 0.5%. I thought it was 1%. So I was wrong about that. It says 0.5% fixed rate. All payments are deferred for 6 months, and it's a 2-year period. It says, can I pay my loan off early? Yes, there are no payment penalties. Do I need to pledge any collateral? No collateral needed. Do I have to do a personal guarantee? No, there's no personal guarantee requirement. This might be the best loan ever in the history of given loans. What do I need to certify? As part of your application, you need to certify in good faith that these certifications are all on that application form, but that you have economic uncertainty that makes loan necessary to support your ongoing operations. You were affected somehow. I've had some businesses call me, like grocery stores, who were interested in applying, and I just told them, were they affected, by the economic disaster, or were they affected by the pandemic? And if their sales went down, they were affected, but many grocery store sales went up. So you do have to make the case that you're affected somehow. Most of us are affected negatively. You have not and will not receive another loan under this program. You can do it one time. You got one shot at it. They only do it once. Things may change in the future if Congress, releases another stimulus package, but for now, you can only apply for this once. Same thing with the EIDL. You apply for it once, get it once, that's it. You'll provide the lender the documentation that verifies the number of full-time equivalent employees on your payroll and the dollar amount of the payroll costs covered by and your covered mortgage interest payments and whatnot. So you'll need to get this documentation together. You know, this is a loan. They will be asking for some documentation to support your claims. So be prepared to get that stuff together, whether it's statements, you know, from your tax preparer or CPA, or if you do your payroll yourself, any type of documentation you can get together. Loan forgiveness will be provided for the sum of documented payroll costs, covered mortgage interest payments, and so forth. And they may allow other types of documentations. I mean, it'll probably depend on the bank. So that's a conversation for the bank. All information you provided in your application and in all supporting documents and forms is true and accurate. So you can't make false claims or statements. You acknowledge that the lender will calculate the eligible loan amount using the tax documents you submitted. You affirm that the tax documents are identical to those you submitted to the IRS. They can pull your last tax return going back to 2018 if you haven't filed 2019 tax returns to get an indication that you know, the numbers that you're reporting are not out of whack. So you can actually use your tax return as a point of reference or document to support your claims if you've done your 2019 or 2018, but you can also use other documents. So essentially that is the PPP program. And another question that comes up is how long will it take us to get money? This $10,000 advance, I think I mentioned, they're saying 3 days to a week of approval once you apply for the EIDL. But then once you're approved, they're saying 2 weeks or more to get the money. So it's going to be a little while. Also, if you want to know the status of your EIDL loan, you have to contact customer service, which is this number right here. This 1-800 number, 1-800-659-2955. And they will be able to tell you the status of your loan, and that's for the EIDL loan. For the payroll protection program, this money, if you are approved, should go out a lot faster than the EIDL loan. And the reason being is you apply for the PPP through a local bank. The local bank has the money. So theoretically, if you are approved, they could probably give you the money the same day, if not within a couple days, because they have the money on hand to lend and they can just get it right to you. Whereas, you know, the EIDL is from the federal government and the systems just roll a little bit slower that way. So the PPP, once you're approved, you could probably expect the money to come a lot faster than if you're approved by the EIDL loan. The problem with the PPP right now is that the banks aren't really approving loans at a fast rate. A lot of banks are only accepting current customers. Some are only accepting current customers who have loans with that bank. And some have started accepting and stopped, saying they've reached their number. So you just need to talk to your local bank and find out where you are in that process, and hopefully they can clear things up and get it rolling for you. And like I said, and I'll repeat, it's a fluid situation and things are changing all the times. The SBA is still clarifying, you know, some of this with the banks. And so I expect things to change with the banks over the next couple of weeks and basically have some different, you probably have some different answers next week with banks. But first thing, definitely talk to the bank. So I'll try to answer some of these questions too, Gary. You hop in. And I think I might have answered some of these, but you know, we will see if we can answer them again, because I know as being an instructor, repetition is important. You got to hear things more than one time for sure. It says, can contractors like bookkeepers be paid out of the PPP or the EIDL if you do not pay withholding tax costs for individuals? I would say yes. Yes. Independent contractors can pay. You just have to have your documentation. For the PPP, you'll have to have documentation of what you were paid through a tax return or other documents. And you can also get paid, like I said, for utilities, rent, etc. The EIDL loan as well, you should qualify just like anybody else for the advance. Really the SBA is determining how much money you get on EIDL for the loan component of EIDL. So you start with that initial streamline application, and from what we hear, the SBA will come back and say, hey, this is how much you will be eligible or approved for the grant, and this is how much you'll be for the loan. It might be zero for the loan. It might be $0 to $10,000 for the grant. And it might be, you know, both for the loan. And you can, you know, if they approve you for a loan, you don't have to take it. You can say, no, thanks, I don't want a loan. You can just take the grant. But yeah, would you agree with that, Gary?
Yes. And I would add to it that what I've mentioned to some people in their questions, the EIDL is more flexible in terms of what you can use the money for, and you can get more money with the EIDL loan. The PPP is mainly just for payroll, although there are a few other things you can pay out of it. But I would definitely suggest try getting the EIDL before going to the PPP, and also noting that you're going to have to give you're going to have to give records of your payroll. So a 1099 is not an employee. And that's key to understand, that 1099s are contractors. They can apply for these things independently. They do not need to go through you, the person who gave them the 1099. So, but you cannot claim a 1099 person as an employee.
Okay, so, and I saw where you did answer some of these questions. Let's see, last thing, I was advised to not pay myself being taxed on an S Corp during 2019. How do I calculate document payroll? If you didn't pay yourself on an S Corporation, I don't know if you paid yourself in dividends. But if you don't have any if you do not have any documented way that you compensated yourself, that might be a tough one. But if you did pay yourself in dividends, that might be the way to go, I would think. But we can try to clarify that. And we're not going to have the answers to everything. I can tell you that right now. Some things we would have to go back and look up, and we'd have to move up the chain to the SBA and ask our people at the SBA, you know, what's going on there. But that's a good question. We'll try to get that answer to you.
And Tyrone, you can apply for both the PPP and the EIDL, but if you get accepted for both, you just need to understand what you can use the money for, out of which account, and what you cannot. So if you use the PPP for payroll, then you won't be able to use the EIDL for payroll. You can use the EIDL for other working capital expenditures, but you can't use the PPP and the EIDL for the same payroll.
Yeah, it's called double dipping. They don't want you to double dip. And the worst that could happen with the PPP is it doesn't become forgivable. If you got paid for it through the EIDL, it just becomes a loan, which you saw was 0.5% for 2 years.
Okay, and for the churches, someone asked about churches. Churches can apply for both of these products, for each one of either of these two. But again, if your employees are 1099, then they should be applying for the PPP as self-employed individuals. So they should apply by themselves and not through the church.
Yeah, if your business, if you have a business where you have contract employees, for instance, like a beauty salon maybe, or a barbershop, and maybe you have 1099 employees that work there, those employees, you really couldn't count them as employees, because they're actually their own business. They could go in and apply for EIDL, for the EIDL loan, for their business. So if you're renting a chair at a barbershop and you're an independent contractor, then you would apply for the EIDL yourself.
Mm-hmm. Now, someone just put in a question. My average payroll was $3,500, but the bank said I was eligible to borrow $600. So it depends on the information that you gave to the bank for them to come up with that determination. So we can't really answer that question. It really depends on the bank. But I do know that the federal government is giving $600 to self-employed people through a different program. So Jim, should I go ahead and cover this, the one from the Labor Department?
Yeah, I'll just say one more thing about what the bank said. Like I mentioned before, it's pretty fluid, and the banks are saying a lot of different things right now, but they don't have all the information. And I think a lot of things with banks are going to change. So I would just go back and maybe try to renegotiate with that banker and ask them why, because you have $3,500 payroll per month, and why only $600. According to the program, you would think that you should be eligible for more, because the idea is that they want you to retain all of those employees. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't make much sense if they would only fund you for a portion of the employees, because then you'd have to lay off those employees, which goes against what the regulation is saying. So I would kind of question that. And like Gary, I think, put in the comments, feel free to call us anytime. We can provide our information. I think the commission has provided our information, our emails. You can email us, and then if you want to talk on the phone, we can call. And also, we can video conference as well. But yeah, go ahead, and Gary, with your information, the latest information from Treasury.
Okay. All right. So there is a slightly different program that is available, and it is through the Department of Labor. So if you are self-employed, okay, if you're self-employed, chances are you do not pay into you don't pay into unemployment. So if you're a partnership or a sole proprietor, you do not get to, if your business shuts down in normal times, you wouldn't be able to go to the unemployment line and file for unemployment, because you don't pay into the unemployment system. Only W-2'd employees pay into the unemployment system. But because of this COVID-19, if you are self-employed, you can go and apply for unemployment based upon this particular situation. So this is called what they call the PUA. Basically it is for payroll for unemployment based on this situation. So this website is the Department of Employment and Workforce for the state, but this is the COVID response website. So if you put in the address here with COVID-hub, it will take you to this page, and it will tell you how to go in and apply for this based upon the COVID-19 response. So there are a couple of things to note about this particular program. These are the people who are eligible for this. If you are an individual who gets a 1099, you are eligible to go through the unemployment. If you are self-employed, you can also go through this. Church employees, nonprofit employees, even if you work, if you are a governmental employee, but they laid you off, you can also go through this unemployment. Independent contractors, gig economy workers, all of these people are available for this through the Department of Employment and Workforce. Okay, so you can go in and apply, and they give you can be eligible for up to $600 per week in additional benefit if you apply under this. Now, if you are an employer and you are going to lay off your employees, you can go through this system and you can apply for your employees directly. Okay, so you can take care of it and do a group claim for everyone who works for you. Now, ultimately, the government wants you to keep people on payroll. So you have up to June 30th to rehire your employees. So because of the PPP, we're not sure how long it's going to take for you to get the money for the EIDL. We're not exactly sure how soon you'll get the money from those programs. You can temporarily lay off your employees. They can go through the unemployment part and get paid from unemployment. But you have to rehire those people through the EIDL program or through PPP in order for you to get the for it to be forgiven. You have to hire those people back before June 30th. You have to hire them back. So if you do get the money from the PPP program or you get the money from the EIDL, you do have to rehire those employees before June 30th because your employees cannot double dip as well. So either they're getting the money from unemployment or they're getting the money from you as an employee. But the government prefers that you keep your employees. So this is a good program if there's a gap between how much money you have for you to continue paying employees and you trying to wait to get this money from the PPP or the EIDL, then you can put them on the unemployment part until you can get money from the other two programs. But as soon as you get the money from the other two programs, you have to rehire those employees. And one other thing about both the PPP and the EIDL program, the forgiveness part, well, for the PPP program, the forgiveness part is not an automatic. You actually have to, once this thing comes to an end, you have to call your bank and request that the money is forgiven. And at that point, you have to provide them with the documentation that you did everything that you were supposed to. So if you are paying payroll using the PPP program, you're going to have to give the bank the documentation to show that you did rehire those people, that you did pay them out of that money. That's the only way it's going to be forgiven. So you still have to provide documentation at the end that you did exactly what you're supposed to do. Now, why would you hire the people back and use put them back on payroll versus going through just letting them stay on unemployment? That money that you get from the PPP program, again, as long as you're paying people payroll, that money is forgivable, completely forgivable, and you can include those other things up to 25% and have the entire thing forgiven. So you really want to use that because that's the easiest and cheapest way of doing it. But it may take it a little more time for you to be able to do that. So if you want to put people on unemployment, you want to lay them off temporarily, this would be the way to do it through this other government program. So be sure to go to this website. There is a place for you to go if you are an employer where you can go on here and ask questions if you are the employer. And this is also will give you instruction if you are the employee or the contractor. So this page is the best place to go first.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your expertise and for presenting this information. I can definitely say it's been an invaluable resource, and you have definitely assisted our communities and small business owners and others as alike. Looking through the comments section, I see no more questions. Just to let people know, we will have their contact information and all the other information that was shared today available on our website, which is cma.sc.gov. I definitely want to say on behalf of the Board of Commissioners for the Commission of Minority Affairs, and especially our Executive Director, Dr. Dolores DaCosta, I would like to thank everybody for participating in today's session, whether it be by listening, asking questions. We definitely want to thank our presenters, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Robinson. Thank you both for explaining more about the EIDL and the PPP. And once again, we'll have their contact information and other instruction materials available on our website shortly. That website is cma.sc.gov. Once again, thank you to all of today's participants. Our sincere hope is that you learn much today on how to ensure your business stays viable and not only stays viable, but thrives during this time. We understand that this is a difficult economic situation, a difficult situation in general. And we ask that you please share the information that you just learned to others who need access to this information and also the capital resources that were presented today. As always, we would like to thank once again our CMA Board of Commissioners. I definitely want to thank all the staff members of CMA who worked to facilitate today's webinar. As always, please know that as a state agency, we are a resource, and as such, please do not hesitate to contact us should you need us. Once again, we appreciate your participation. We ask for everyone to please stay safe, stay home, only travel out if it's absolutely necessary, and have a great day, and we thank you all.